Just ahead on American Black Journal, I'll have an in-depth conversation with Wayne County Prosecutor Kym. We'll talk about her efforts to get thousands of abandoned rape kits tested. Plus, we'll look at some of the cases she's prosecuted, including the corruption trial of former Detroit Mayor Kwame Kilpatrick. There's a lot to talk about, so stay right here. American Black Journal is next.
At DTE Energy, we believe that we have a greater responsibility. We believe that being part of a community means being involved in the fabric of that community, investing time, effort, and resources in the communities we serve. DTE Energy Foundation is a proud sponsor of American Black Journal.
Welcome to American Black Journal. I'm Stephen Henderson. 11 years ago, Kym Worthy became the first female and the first African American to lead the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. Since then, she's been at the forefront of several high-profile criminal cases, including the corruption trial of former Detroit Mayor Kwame Kilpatrick. Most recently, Prosecutor Worthy has been tackling an issue shared by many other cities, a backlog of untested rape kits. More than 11,000 rape kits were found in a Detroit police storage facility in 2009. Many of the kits have now been processed thanks to grants and donations. And this week, the task force investigating and prosecuting leads in the rape cases announced stepped-up efforts to bring charges. I'm pleased to have Wayne County Prosecutor Kym Worthy as my guest today. Welcome to American Black Journal.
Thank you.
So let's start with the rape kits. Where do we stand with all this? As I said in the open, a lot of them have been processed. The next step is bringing charges and trying some of these cases, which is in some ways even a more expensive endeavor.
It is, and actually a even more necessary step. We have 10,000 that have either been tested or in the final stages of being tested. So that's great. We have a few more to test, about 1,000 or so left to test. But now, if you test all the kits, it doesn't bring justice to not one victim.
Right.
So it's great to test them. It's great to get any CODIS hits, and we have about 1,133 CODIS hits so far. More and more are coming in every day. It's great to get them to CODIS because it helps law enforcement solve not only rapes but also other crimes.
There's other crimes
so
in there too, sure.
But it doesn't bring justice to anyone. So now the next critical step is to be able to raise the funds for the investigation and prosecution of these kits.
So now, talk to me though about what that means. The testing of these kits. I'm not sure people really understand what's involved here, and then how you get from testing it to saying, well, here are the people that we need to start looking at.
Well, the reason why women, and not just women are raped, but I'm going to use women because they're overwhelmingly women, go and have a sexual assault kit examination, which is a 4 to 10 hour, very intimate exploring of their entire bodies to get some kind of forensic evidence, saliva, hair, fibers, anything to help get a genetic profile and try to help the perpetrator be caught when the forensic scientists are done with their profiles. And so then to learn that they're sitting on the shelves for years and years and years is disheartening. So we've gotten most of them tested, but again...
And testing them means taking the evidence that's in the kit and matching it against...
The scientists will take whatever evidence is in the kit and and hopefully you have enough genetic material to make a profile that can then be loaded and entered into CODIS. And CODIS, C-O-D-I-S, is the DNA National Database.
Right.
And so
if I'm a criminal in Kansas, for instance, there is a genetic profile of me in that database, and if I had committed a rape in Detroit at some point, it would.
If there is a profile of you in there, and we put a profile then that matches, it can match to you. But there are two different kinds of hits. It either matches to a known person, or it matches another case. For example, if a woman was raped and the nightgown was taken and put into evidence, and the forensic scientist pulled a profile from that nightgown and put it into CODIS, it could possibly hit to a piece of evidence in another case, but we don't know who the person is.
Okay. And how many of the kits are you getting those kind of multiple hits?
Well, we so far, and again, the testing, more and more testing is coming in every day, and we have 288 identified serial rapists, so people who are in the system more than once. And then, like I said before, we have 1,133 CODIS hits that we are to work with.
Right. And so that next step is saying, all right, well, let's go find these people and bring them to justice.
Let's take each individual hit, work up a case the way it should have been worked up when it first happened. So you have to still go find the victim, you have to find the defendant, you have to find the witnesses, any other evidence besides just the DNA evidence, and put the case together the old-fashioned way. And so, we discovered these kids in 2009. We've done a lot of work since then. Most of them are tested now. But now we have another kind of backup or backlog in my office where we have over 600 cases right now where we have DNA hits that have to be investigated. They're waiting to have an investigator assigned.
Yeah, and that gets to all the problems that you have with resources. And
exactly.
You just don't have enough people.
Exactly. Up until a couple months ago, we had 2. And contrast that with the city of Cleveland, who discovered about 4,000 kits several years ago. They had 35 investigators. I think 25 to 35 investigators to our 2 that we had. Now we have 7. Because we have 5 that have been embedded from the Detroit Police Department at no cost to us. And then we're getting ready to hire more because we have funds that are being raised and coming in.
Right, and the time that these investigators need to spend with these kids, I mean, we're not talking about weeks or months. In some cases, this is going to be years before you can
Sometimes
clear
they
all
will.
this up.
You know, we made a decision early on to assign 5, 6, 7 cases to one investigator because we want to make sure that they're investigated thoroughly. And so sometimes we can find the victim on the first phone call. Sometimes it takes months to find the victim. Sometimes it takes a long time to find the defendant. And sometimes we get lucky and everything's done fairly quickly. And so you never know when you pick up that CODIS hit file what you're going to and how much time is involved. It's very, very investigative heavy. Very much so. And since they're all going to be embedded in my office, they're working side by side with the prosecutor. So search warrants and whatever we need can quickly be gotten. And it's great for the investigators because they know exactly what prosecutors need to have a successful case in court.
How did we get to the place where we had 11,000 backlogged rape kits? I'm not sure people really understand how that happened. This was not just a question of resources, but also there was a cultural problem in DPD that didn't assign the kind of priority to these crimes or to these victims that people probably assume they should.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons, not just DPD either, not just the Detroit Police Department, it's a national problem.
That's right.
There's over 400,000 backlog untested kits in this country. And so it's cultural throughout every state in America. But there's a lot of issues. There's resource issues. There's like we said, the cultural change that's shifting now where police officers 30 years ago, 25 years ago, 20 years ago, try to talk to rape victims who did have they were brave enough to report and brave enough to go through a sexual assault exam, and still trying to talk them out of testifying. Or if they were from a profession that they deemed didn't have any dignity, for example, they treated them differently. And that's not right, because every case that walks into the police department should be investigated with the same vigor as every other case. And there's a lot of victim blaming in sexual assault. Lots of victim blaming. That's a huge problem, where it's the victim's fault. Why were you there? Why were you wearing that? And no one would ask a robbery victim, why were you wearing that necklace when you went to that party so if you got robbed? But they ask rape victims all the time, why were you dressed that way? Why did you do that? And that has nothing whatever to do with the fact that she was a victim of a violent crime.
And we're seeing that in, there are detailed reports now coming out about these kits and the crimes that they were investigating. When you read the reaction of the officers in some of these cases, it is really a hair-raising experience to see how distant they are from the victims, how callous they can be to some of these victims. When you say victim blaming, I think that's a pretty light term to use. I mean, there's some real just dismissiveness.
And the report you're speaking of was actually a grant that we received from the National Institute of Justice, which is an arm of the Department of Justice. The former Attorney General Eric Holder and the Vice President of the United States, Joe Biden, are very, very passionate about this issue and very instrumental in helping us get these grant monies. So we received about $1.8 million to do a 3-year study to have a national protocol as to how a police department or an agency should react and what they should do when rape kits are found. And 2, to look at how a rape victim is treated throughout the time she enters the criminal justice system through to the end. And that's where, in the files of these rape kit victims, where some of the evidence was discovered in what you're talking about now. And the fact that they felt comfortable enough to write it down.
I mean, this is in the reports, and the descriptions of the victims, as you say, if they
calling them all kinds of names, calling them out of their name, calling them derogatory names, filthy names.
And so and again, this is dating back to the 80s, into the 90s, even into the last decade. How much progress do you feel like has been made on that issue over the time? Are we still in a position where we don't have officers who understand how to deal with these crimes?
Well, let me tell you what, you'd have to ask the officers that, but let me tell you what we've been one of the things we've been doing is we've offered the police department and the Detroit Police Department and other departments across the state free training. And this comes from the Michigan Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Prevention and Treatment Board. And so training is key. And frankly, I think when officers are evaluated when they go to the academy, they should be evaluated on these issues, and maybe they are. But certainly we should take a second look at that. But we have to deal with attitudes. We have to deal with the attitudes that police officers have, not only to sexual assault and domestic violence, but to everything.
Right.
If we're going to have a good officer.
Yeah. I'm curious, what is the reaction you're getting from some of these victims when you guys are reaching out, in some cases, years and years and years later, and saying, hey, you know what? We've got a lead on this, and we're going to investigate it.
One of the very smart things we did, and I can't. When I say there's smart things that we did, I'm not saying that I came up with these ideas, but a few smart things we did is we hooked up with victim advocates organizations and victim advocacy groups who, as prosecutors, we think we deal with victims. We do deal with victims of crime every day, and we think we do a good job. But we knew once we started tackling this issue, we needed to do two things. Look at the experts, because we're knocking on doors of women who potentially, maybe they were in a sex trade, and that they've turned their life around. They've gotten off of drugs, they've gotten off of alcohol, or whatever issues they had, some of them, not all of them, some of them, and they may have turned their lives around and be married and have a family.
They may not want to go back.
That's right.
To talk about that.
We had to make sure that we dealt with the most deliberate care that we could. So we developed it took us 9 months or almost over a year to come up with a victim notification policy. So when we first contact the victim, it's a very minimal contact, and we tell her some very basic things about what's going on. And then we come back and we're more detailed. And we never force a victim to go forward. We have the support there for them. And we try to be as careful as we can. And most of our victims are cooperating, they want to go forward.
Yeah.
And then another very smart thing we did is we hooked up with the Joyful Heart Foundation, and they have done, I can't tell you the things they have done for us in this movement, and the expert that they have working with them on treatment issues and heal the healer issues and dealing with victim issues that we have and advocacy issues and issues of education and letting people know. And that's another very smart thing that we did to make it easier to deal with this whole issue and how we approach victims in the process.
Yeah. So what are we looking at in terms of both resources going forward and timeline going forward? Do you still need money to bring all of this to a close? And then how much longer is it going to be?
We still do. We've had this southeastern Michigan is a very philanthropic region, and we've had Detroit businessmen and women
people are starting to step up. Yeah.
And the latest endeavor that we have is we are working my office and the Detroit Crime Commission and the Michigan Women's Foundation form a coalition called Enough Said, Enough Sexual Assault in Detroit. And the mission is to raise $10 million to be able to employ investigators and prosecutors to be able to get through these cases. It's going to cost more than that, but that's what they're committed to do, and I'm very happy to be working with them. And just last week we had a very large donation from the MOCA organization of $100,000.
Yeah. And so, and the state, I know, is also starting to kick in.
Yes.
But what about that training? That training that we need for officers going forward? We're still looking for ways to
it's free, so no one can say we can afford to send our officers, and so we constantly offer. Last week, the organization I talked to constantly offers training, and we will move mountains to help with grants or anything else that we need to do to help with that training, and to really be tuned in.
Yeah.
And even my office does training, and we have done for many years for sexual assault, domestic violence, and child abuse to officers as well. Yeah. So we're willing to, at any time, in any place, I'm willing to take a prosecutor off what they're doing and send them out to train someone, because that's ultimately important. It's going to give us a better case. It's going to give us better victims. It's going to give us confidence in the criminal justice system. And hopefully, ultimately, it's going to help bring more victims out of the dark who may not have reported rape in the past and will now report, because they know that we're treating them differently, and we're trying to train officers to learn how to treat them differently.
Yeah. Let's change the subject here to I guess the news. You are never without lots to do, it seems, in your job, and one of the things that you have to do is chase our public officials. I feel like in a way that I have not seen in other communities. The latest is State Senator Virgil Smith, who found himself in a really bad situation a couple weeks ago. His ex-wife was in an even worse situation, allegedly. Tell me how you handle these kinds of cases. And I know you can't talk about that case in specificity, but just the difficulty in, or maybe not, in dealing with elected officials when they get in trouble.
Well, we have in my office a unit called Public Integrity Unit, and we deal with these kinds. They didn't do the ex-mayor's case, but they are very, very skilled and trained. They deal with police officer-involved shootings. They deal with whether a police officer shoots or a police officer is shot, and they also deal with public officials. And so we don't chase them. We have
that's my language.
Yeah, we have investigative agency, usually the Michigan State Police, that will bring us that information. In this case, it was the Detroit Police Department. And they will bring us what we have. But whenever we have a public official or a police officer or a person in a position of authority, we will always redo the entire investigation.
Oh, is that right? See, I didn't know that.
Yes. And so, and this domestic violence is a little different because we have our domestic violence prosecutors who reviewed it. And so those investigations don't tend to take as long as some of the others. But if we have a elected official that's charged with corruption or something, we will, or a police officer, like I said, we will redo the entire investigation. We don't just take what they give us. We will re-interview every witnesses. We'll go find witnesses of our own. We'll redo everything. Even if the Michigan State Police, who is very thorough and experts at doing this, we still will redo it with whatever police agency brings it to us. Yeah. Because we want to be absolutely sure that the information we have is correct.
I mean, and that suggests that there's some pressure on you when you do this. I mean, and I said in the open, you know, I mentioned the Kilpatrick case, and of course, I mean, you and I can joke about, well, how long are we going to talk about that? But that's more than any other case, I think, that you've tried. People will remember that.
Yeah, people think that and I've said this before. People think the decision was really hard, or the recent decision we had to make, and it's not, because
it's the law.
Because if you let the evidence and the facts guide you, then you don't make many mistakes.
Right.
And it doesn't matter to me which way the wind blows. It really doesn't matter to me how many marches they have around the courthouse. It doesn't matter to me the letters we get, or the phone calls we get, or the email we get to pressure, because we get sometimes 100, 200, 300 emails. You've got to charge this or don't charge this, and that really has no effect, because that has nothing whatever to do with bringing a case against somebody in court. The law and the facts guide us, and that's it. Yeah. And you know, I don't care what your name is. I don't care what your last name is. I don't care what your ethnicity is, your religion, your race. It doesn't matter to me in the charging process, because in the charging process, everybody's to be treated the same. Yeah. And the only decision you have to make is whether you can prove that case beyond a reasonable doubt on the facts and evidence. That's it. And when prosecutors start making decisions for other reasons, then you might as well quit.
Then you get in trouble.
Then you get in trouble. And so, or you have potential to get in trouble. So that's not the hard part. You want to make sure you have to deal with all the outside pressures, and that can be difficult, but you got to wall yourself off from that, because you cannot let that pressure decide if you're going to charge somebody with a criminal offense. You just can't.
Yeah. What about resources? I mean, the county is in terrible financial shape. County Executive Warren Evans, the new county executive, has a plan out to try to get things back turned around. He's asking for a lot from everybody. You have talked many times about how just from the jump, they don't fund your office the way that it needs to be. It's always less than what you need to do.
We're the worst funded office in the country.
Right. Well, so
the studies have been done. The numbers are out. In large urban cities and people of a population size, we are woefully. They have 2 and 3 times the number of prosecutors, investigators, and support staff that we have. We're just the worst. In fact, they use us. Other offices across the country use us as an example of how not to fund your office.
Don't do it this way, right?
So, but I have to say, I think I believe things are going to get better. I know that the current executive has the same goals that I have when it comes to public safety and wanting a safe Detroit and Wayne County. I know what they're up against. And
it helps that he's a law enforcement officer.
Yes, and we are working together to try to work this out, because I know he very much wants to give me the resources I need to be able to fund the office. And so it's a work in progress, and a lot of it has to do with what the county has and doesn't have. But I will never stop fighting and asking for what we need, because we are not doing the job that we should be doing.
Are you going to be asked to make more sacrifice in the short term so that things can get better?
I don't know what I'm going to be asked yet. I do know that when it comes to the 5% cut and things like that, that my line prosecutors are not going to be effective, because we're already the worst paid for the work that we do. So I'm glad that he sees that and understands. And it's not just me, it's the deputies and some others in the county, so it's not just me, because we cannot attract and keep in office. And we already are so woefully underfunded, affecting our conviction rates and the way that we should be doing cases. So, you know.
Okay. I want to turn again to a different topic. We saw riots in Baltimore recently over police mistreatment of an African-American man. That's something we're seeing in lots of different communities sort of flare up. But of course, the person that took center stage in all of that was the prosecutor in Baltimore. And she came out and charged lots of police officers with murder, manslaughter, and things like that. I'm curious what your reaction is when you see this going on in other cities. First of all, the mistreatment of African American men by police officers, but then also the sort of reaction and the things that these communities are trying to do to respond. Where do we stand with all that in Detroit?
Well, you know, the first thing you think of is what we did back in 1992. Many years ago, when we had to stand up and do the same thing without video and all of that.
When you were the lead prosecutor in that case with Nevin, Nevers and Budson.
We convicted 3 police officers, but 2 main police officers, Nevers and Budson, with homicide.
Right.
And that was, and I don't know if it still is, I think it probably is, that was certainly the first time that the police officers on duty had been convicted of murder.
Yeah.
And so, we paid a lot for making that price. And my boss at the time, John O'Hare, paid a lot politically for endorsing our decision to charge.
I think there's some people who wouldn't even remember.
He almost didn't get reelected because of it.
Right.
Because we did the right thing.
Right.
And so it was I would just remember, 20 years ago or whatever it's been, having to do it back then as opposed to now. And this has been going on in every city, every major city and every small city across the country for a very long time. But now with social media and all the other things that are going on, cameras everywhere, it's certainly being brought into the forefront, but this is nothing new. Yeah. But basically, it goes back to what I said before. If you're going to be the DA or the prosecutor or the state's attorney, you have to be willing to make these tough decisions that I don't think are tough, but they're tough decisions for many people, because when you don't let the facts and evidence guide you, and you let yourself be swayed by the fact that it's a police officer and prosecutors work with police officers every day, then it can be a hard decision for some people to make. But
do we have the same kind of problems here with the relationship between police and the community as you see it?
I think it's getting better.
Like Baltimore?
And we try very, very hard to maintain those relationships, not only with community activists, but with pastors and with others in the community. And I know that Chief Craig and his team have tried very hard to work on that. And I think it's getting better. And I'm not saying it can't happen here. When I'm talking about, I'm not talking about the
reaction, right?
But I would like to think that because we've tried so hard, and we've tried and I personally have tried hard to maintain integrity, and I hope that people see that they may not like what I'm doing from time to time, but I hope they believe and continue to believe that whatever we do is going to be done for the right reasons. The other thing that gets lost in that, though, is I think a lot of people, because this is happening, it's not happening more, but because it's being brought to the forefront more.
Right, we're seeing it more.
That people are stereotyping all police officers, which is also unfortunate.
Yeah, right.
The overwhelming majority of police officers are good people who really want to do their jobs, just like there's good and bad, I've told you before, in every profession. Yeah. And so I think we have to be careful with stereotyping everybody.
Well, and we need police officers, especially in the African American community, where we are more likely to be victims of crime than other people. I mean, I think that's sort of the flip side of all of this.
Yeah, and quite frankly, and I've said this privately, and quite frankly, there's a small schism between prosecutors of color and prosecutors who are not prosecutors of color. And sometimes it doesn't guide what we do. But I think sometimes we're willing to consider things.
You see it differently?
I think we kind of see it differently because of the history. But that doesn't change how you charge.
Right.
But I think some of us, and not all of us, are more willing to look at things in a different kind of way. Yeah. More willing to accept that bad can happen.
Yeah. We've got about 2 minutes left. We are seeing efforts to reform criminal justice in a much bigger way, including Governor Snyder this week. A lot of reforms talking about sentencing and things like that. Are those solutions, partial solutions to some of the things that we're seeing in
I think they're partial solutions, but there are also things that some of us were doing a long time ago. And I just want, I'm glad to see this from the governor. I think he's certainly on the right track. And I have to say, Governor Snyder and his team has been very gracious with their time, talking about crime and criminal justice issues in Wayne County. Yeah. And it may surprise a lot of people, but certainly we're members of different parties, but there is no party schism when it comes to wanting a safe Michigan, a safe southeastern Michigan. So they've been very, very good, and we'll continue to work with them. So I'm glad that he came out with that. There's a lot of work to be done, and I'm hoping that that those mandates get funded that he's talking about. And I think that's going to be a critical issue going forward.
That's always the thing with you, is people say, why don't you do this? But you don't have enough money just to do the basics.
And they need to be funded, and then prosecutors need to be funded too. I think we're the gatekeepers to the entire criminal justice system, but sometimes we think we're an afterthought as to funding sometimes. Not so with his office, but certainly that's what happens sometimes. But I think it's on the right track, and I think if we do it the right way, it's good to have a good idea, but you've got to do
I'll have to have you back to talk about sentencing reform, because I know you and I disagree on that.
A little bit.
A little bit. That's okay though, right? But I mean, he wants to get into that, and I think he will do it in a more responsible way, at least from your point of view. I think.
Yeah, there's some landmine issues there.
Yeah.
And like anything else, it's one thing to have a good idea, but you've got to execute that good idea in the right way.
Right. All right. Thank you for being here, and we'll have you back soon. Before we say goodbye, all of us here at American Black Journal extend our condolences to the family of veteran Detroit singer Orthea Barnes Kennerly. Orthea passed away at the age of 70 while in the U.S. Virgin Islands for a performance. Her powerful contralto voice was well known here in Detroit. She was an ordained minister whose missionary work changed lives in Africa. She's survived by her husband, Robert Kennerly. We will remember Orthea Barnes Kennerly for her talent and for her commitment to helping others. That's our program for today. Thanks for watching. You can get more information about our guest at AmericanBlackJournal.org. As always, you can connect with us on Facebook and on Twitter. You can also hear our program on WDET 101.9 FM. We'll return with a new edition of American Black Journal on Sunday, June 21st. And in the meantime, you can go online to check out past episodes. We'll see you next time.
At DTE Energy, we believe that we have a greater responsibility. We believe that being part of a community means being involved in the fabric of that community, investing time, effort, and resources in the communities we serve. DTE Energy Foundation is a proud sponsor of American Black Journal.